All right, so now we're going to start looking at the video encoding part of the script that I will now show, specifically x265. AV1 will get its own video. And there's a fair amount of stuff going on here that we don't need to pay too much attention to, including the audio stuff that's right here. Yeah, that audio will be handled separately as well. That'll be a different video. So this is a script I would use when I'm only interested in one audio track. If I want multiple, I need to come over here. It's got a number of things different. A lot of things are similar. The multi-channel audio stuff, that's going to be another video, as I already said. But we do start up here with tune and also this set rate 265, which is set up here. So something I need to explain. Well, first, technically, I don't actually need to do that. I don't need to set tune. It would be blank anyway if I didn't create it and just set it to nothing. But it can be nice if you can use a variable to create it and have it ready, even though batch doesn't really care. Now let me explain about the rate just rate 265. I've said this in one of the previous videos, I recall. I always am using x265 with a bitrate limit. It works very well. I am very happy with that. But because I'm always using a bitrate limit, and I can't set it up, so if I don't set a limit, it'll be fine. It'll just be completely variable. But I've not done that because I've always used it this way, so I do need to set an original, a catch-all rate, which that's what's all the way up the top. So I can change, it's the fallback bitrate, I can change that easily. And then here is where it actually gets it stored to the rate variable, which is then used later. And by the way, tune, I will also explain that, but down here where it becomes relevant. So now after this, and hang on, let me do that, we have this. So after the rate is set, we have this, call vid height, which is a custom function down here. Where is it? There it is. Where all it's doing is it's using ffprobe. If you looked at the volume detect scripts, that video, if you looked at that, same kind of deal here. Where all it's doing is it's going in to find out, hey, what is the height of the video? So is it 480, which would be a DVD? Is it 720, which there might be some extras that are like that, but or is it 1080 standard Blu-ray? Or is it 4K, which would be 2160? This is not built around 2160 though. If that is the case, sorry, just a little twist there. It finds that height, and then it will test. I have the batch script testing to see, okay, if the height of the video is less than or equal to 1080, set the rate to 3 megabit. Okay, so the bitrate limit will be 3 megabit. If it is 720, if it's less than or equal to 720, so if it's 1080, it fails less than or equal to, because it's not equal to, and so not less than. If it's 720, okay. Set the rate to 2.5 megabit, and if it's 480, it's 1.5 megabit. Where did I get these values? I experimented with a reference video that I was using. And they're not necessarily bad values. I think that they're a good place to start, but it is still reasonable and a good idea to go in and adjust them. Like, you can do that experimentation, see what happens when you turn it up, turn it down. Not necessarily here. This is all fallback stuff. You can actually set the rate right here. Now, currently, it is just the variable, so we'll just use this fallback. But, like, if we go back to the test script here, yeah, I made some changes. It's just written in. But it is, I can then, let's say I want to test at 4 megabit, I can do that very easily, so it's, yeah. All right. So after that, we get some audio stuff that we're going to ignore, because we're not really concerned with it. Then we have this tune equals grain. So tunes are weird to try to explain, in part because I really only have surface level understanding. But it is basically trying to tell the encoder, hey, use these algorithms instead. Or hey, same algorithm, but tweak a little bit, like, change what the inputs are. But it's more likely, hey, use different algorithms. The grain tune, and 265 actually has multiple tunes. By default, it just is auto. It figures out what it should be on its own. But the grain tune, I recently saw some people saying that it's crap. I disagree with this. it isn't crap, but it is very, very use specific, okay? You need to look at that content and just try, okay, what happens if I turn this on? Does that make it better than with it off if it's just on auto? And yeah, there will be times where it will look better. Why does it look better? Not because it's preserving the grain, in my opinion. Instead, it seems like what happens is the compression artifacting that occurs, just normally because you're compressing the video. It seems like what's happening then is it's just making sure it looks more like grain, film grain, than that kind of noise instead of other kinds of noise. That's legitimately what it looks like, which isn't necessarily bad. It's very, very use specific though. I mean, I think I've had maybe 2 things in my entire collection where that was appropriate. Otherwise, it would just be, no, use 265 or use AV1 that has its own tunes that are not always as nicely named as this. But yeah, so that's there. Chances are you will never use it though. I've mentioned these previously. These in a different video. These are denoisers, which you're even less likely to use these than the grain tune. These are just two different denoisers. You would not want to use them together. Any denoising risks removing detail. So actually, I had mentioned this context before. A lot of early Blu-rays, when they were being made, they were running through denoiser because somebody decided that the people wanted not as close to the original film as possible, but they wanted a smoother image. So they would do the denoising. They would then also sharpen. So what detail remained would be more apparent. But it was, you're removing a lot of detail, potentially. Depends. There's different levels to it. But some people describe it as giving a waxy appearance. And that can certainly happen if it goes too far. The denoising goes too far. But this is just, if you got something that it is incredibly noisy and there's no way you can get it under control without serious compression artifacting or without a crazy high bitrate, in theory you can try some denoising to help. There's other options. Go to other options first. Don't do that. Okay, now we got AQ mode, adaptive quantization mode. Default is 2. 4 is auto variance with edge info. 3 is auto variance with bias for dark scenes. So I had already been looking through the documentation for the various configuration stuff, parameters for AV1. I realized, x265 also has the same kind of documentation. I should look through that as well. So I looked through it, and I didn't find much. I found this, the SciRD, which I will get to, and then B-frames, and that was it. It was 3 things that I found that were interesting, outside of things I already knew, like the presets, which actually are not written here. By default, this will just use medium. Typically, I recommend slow. I'll get to that. I'll get to why I recommend slow a little later. But AQ mode at 4, oh yeah, it's very effective. So I've got down here Star Trek TNG on Blu-ray, and when I first went through that all and put it on the server, that was before AV1 was where it is now. So it was like, yeah, no, AV1 is not gonna do it for me. It's a lot better now, but when I tried doing it again several months ago, and I tried it, AV1 was just exploding, because it turns out TNG is very grainy. It really is, and AV1 was not liking that, okay? It either would be artifacting heavily or higher bit rates than what I already had. That's not acceptable, okay? It's already there. It already looks good enough. I wanted it to look better or get small size, but it's like AV1 wasn't the answer. So it's like, okay, let me see what I can do with 265. I kept the same bitrate limit. I just turned on AQ mode 4, and I actually then turned up the psychovisual here, psychovisual rate distortion. I will explain that briefly, but I turned that up. That should actually be increasing the bitrate. The result, so it's got to be largely AQ mode being 4. It cut down. I basically saved an entire season. Okay, it reduced the file size. It cut the file size overall, the 7 seasons of TNG, so much that it was basically one season became free. That's how much different set play, okay? So yeah, that's just what it is now. Maybe I can go to 3 at some point if I want to, but no, 4 seems to be very effective. Does it impact the image quality? A little bit. There have been times where I would try and look between them both. Between deep 2 and 4. But it was one of those 6 and 1/2 dozen the other kind of situation where it's, does 4 look better? Here it does, here it doesn't. Does 2 look better? Here it doesn't, here it does. I mean, so yeah. But that space saving, worth it. Very much worth it. Okay, so that is active all the time. But the psychovisual rate distortion and the B-frames, those are not, they're commented out, so we'll just use the defaults. So what is this? What is psychovisual rate distortion? So I already talked a little bit about psychovisuals in terms of CRF in another video, talking about how video quality and video compression works. I'm going to give you what is very much a shallow understanding, because I certainly don't know the algorithms. Although, to be clear, the psychovisual rate distortion algorithms vary from encoder to encoder, and sometimes from one version of an encoder to another version of the same encoder. The idea is, in part, to try to maintain the energy of the image or a part of the image. Because it technically is always working on blocks, not the whole image, but same kind of deal. If you're applying it to all the blocks of an image, you're applying it to the whole image. Anyway. So what does that mean? You're trying to maintain the energy. Well, it gets a little wonky. I'm not sure how much for this, but in general, you will see people that say, oh, you've got really grainy content? Okay, turn up the psychovisual rate distortion. Turn that up. Turn up the strength. That will help preserve the detail, preserve the grain. Maybe in 265, not necessarily in AV1. So what's actually happening, to my eyes at least, with the, and this is actually very relevant with FreeRAND, although this I did in AV1, but potentially other anime is like this as well. What it's doing is trying to preserve the energy of the image. So that's just, it looks at the image, it comes up with some metrics. One of them is the energy, and that's basically how much information is in this block or in this image. How much information is there total? It's not paying attention to what the information is. That's my own experience. It's not necessarily accurate. Somebody could say I'm wrong. That's fine. My own experience, though, it does seem to be, that's just a generic measurement of how much information is in the image. And it's like, okay, well, when we're compressing stuff, we're throwing information out. That's how lossy compression works. So the value will be lower. PsyRD, and any psychovisual, is potentially trying to raise that back up. It can do that by either saying, hey, guess what? We're not throwing out that data. Or it's making up the data. It's making up the information. That definitely, when I was testing this, not in 265, in AV1, but definitely when I was doing that, that's what I was seeing, because this is almost certainly being made on computers, so it is naturally got very clean lines everywhere, right? Instead of like hand-drawn what's going to be, no, it's all very clean, straight lines. Different algorithm, because different encoder, but still, I turned that up. It was producing artifacting, because that artifacting, I mean, technically PsyRD might be just, oh yeah, we're putting in artifacts, but it looks right. It looks right for what your eye is expecting there. So it can still improve the quality of the image to how we perceive it. It doesn't mean it is one-to-one accurate. It just means it looks better to us. Because like, oh, hey, your shirt, it's supposed to have all this crazy detail to it. You crank up the PsyRD, it's like, okay, it's going to keep that there. It might not be the same pattern, but it's going to be close. But I do also believe it does also just say, hey, up the bitrate, preserve what's there. It just can also introduce artifacting, which, depending, you'll never notice. Or you will. I mean, it really depends. That's why you gotta experiment with it. But as I also said, with TNG, I turned that up, and it was looking good. It was looking better than what I had before, and ended up being smaller, so I was really happy. That was long enough ago. I can't believe if I took the media off again, maybe I would be able to have some success tuning it in with AV1. But I'm not going to do that. I don't think it's worth it right now. So yeah, there's that. Now there's also B-frames. Okay, so what is that? I would have touched on this a little bit in a different video. So, groups of pictures, right? In an interframe encoding, interframe compression. So how that works is you have what's called an iframe, right? So you got this iframe. That is an image in the video that's completely encoded. The full thing is there. Okay? The next frame, however, is not. It is a p-frame, predicted frame, something like that. The idea there is, okay, this frame, it's the next frame. It's going to be very similar to the frame n. Frame n plus 1 is going to be very similar to that. So, we're just going to store the differences between n and n plus 1. Okay? That's all it's going to do. So, for example, with this video, that thing isn't changing. Neither is the stuff above my head or over there. So from n to n plus 1, it's just going to say, hey, copy that over. Okay? When my head is moving, sometimes I'm turning it. Here, let's say my shoulder, because that's not really turning. It is moving, but it's not really turning. It's going to be like, okay, take the pixels from here and just move them over there, move them over there, move them over there, move them over there. Just move them around. Okay, but you don't need to really change it because it's not turning like that. When I turn my head, you have to do that. You have to, because things are being occluded and disoccluded, you need to then either throw out data because it's no longer relevant or add in the data because, hey, now it's there. Now I have to show that. Okay? But still, that's all technically under difference data, right? So n to n plus 1, you're just encoding the differences from n, which is the iframe, okay? You can have a bunch of p-frames like that, all building on that, okay. But that's a p-frame. It's just going back. So this is a n, and you're talking n plus 1. What is a b-frame? B-frame stands for bidirectional, okay? That's what the b is, bidirectional. So now, instead of this p-frame, let's say it's n plus 3, okay? So it's over here. Instead of it only referencing that one, that iframe, it's referencing the one after. Because there's another iframe over here. It's saying, hey, take information from there as well. Because of that bidirectional nature, it is harder to encode because you need more data in memory. It's also harder to decode because, again, you need more data in the memory. You need that frame M instead of N, so the next iframe I'm going to call it M. You need that one to have been decoded as well and stored in memory so it can reference it. So that's why you can turn it up, you can turn it down. That will impact various things. Encoders do support these, by the way. It is part of the specification, so they are supported, but it is technically a little bit more complex. And as I mentioned in the documentation here, for live action, 5 B-frames is suggested for a group of pictures for live action and CIG, so think that's actually misspelled, but it's computer graphics. 8 suggested for animation, which makes sense because animation you may expect it to be very clean. FreeRAM is very clean. So it's like, okay, yeah, you can do more references to the one after, to the next frame, because you're expecting greater consistency. Take advantage of that, because now that's, let's say, M minus 1. Okay, so the one right before. If it's not a B frame, you have to go all the way back to frame N. Okay, so let's say that's N plus 11. Okay, so it's like every 12 frames you're changing. You're getting a new iframe. Let's say something like that. That is going to be the most different frame in the group of pictures from the iframe. Well, if it instead can point to the frame M, because it's just M minus 1, that's going to be, there's a lot less difference information you need to store there. So that's why, yeah, you'd want to crank up the number of B frames when you start getting there, if it is a clean source, which you can expect with an animation. But I'll be honest, that's there. I tend not to touch it. Okay. So audio filtering, that's well, no, I can quickly explain what this is. So this is just if there is one audio track, that is what this script is for. One audio track. If there's multiple, then the multi-track over here. Use that one. But for this, it's just saying, hey, if you want to adjust the audio, because maybe it was really quiet. You want to crank it up. -AF for audio filter. Then you're identifying the filter in the quotes there, volume, and by default it's just right now 0 dB, so it would be no change. But maybe it was down by 6 dB, so it's like, okay, amplify it by 6, and that will get read in later. Don't think I need that anymore. It's a little bit in the way. Now call x265 process. So this is something that I like doing when I can. I cannot with the multi-channel stuff. That will be a different video. But I like just having the actual command to initiate the processing be a custom function. So that way I can just throw in certain control, certain parameters, and that's it. First is, what is the file we're re-encoding? Next is the rate, which currently is just set by these, but you can easily write that in. Yeah, 4000K. The CRF value, 18, maybe 21, maybe 24. I've even gone to 27 in some cases, and had still look good. And then we've got the preset. Okay, so the preset, I need to explain what that is. So right now it's slow. The default is medium, and it's not just like, it is set to that in the script, but there is also just FMPEG will by default use medium, which is reasonably fast. I think for my 8-core 16-thread processor, it's a 5800X3D, by the way. I think medium is typically 2 to 3 times speed, whereas slow tends to be, for 1080 content, around real-time speed or a little slower. But slow is worth using in my experience. Sorry, my eyes are really sore. Because an artifact that can happen is called mosquito interference, where it kind of looks like around somebody's head, there will be it kind of looks like a halo almost, but it just follows around your motion as though you got a bunch of mosquitoes and it's just following you around. Very annoying. Happens on medium. When I go to slow, it's not there anymore. Slow solves that. All the presets, they contain they are setting a bunch of algorithms, okay? Or giving the parameters to various algorithms. And they do, yeah, slow is slower than mediums. There is also I think there is a slower preset as well than the slowest, and then there's placebo. There's above medium, you've got fast, faster, very fast, super fast, and ultra fast. And the idea is, okay, we're going to have the algorithms be simpler and simpler and simpler when going faster in order to have it go faster. But that does mean potentially lower quality. That depends. But definitely it'll start taking more data because, hey, I'm just doing the math quick, okay? I'm not trying to have it be the most efficient. I'm just get these frames through here quickly. One of the things that I do know changes based on the preset is I mentioned motion vectors earlier. So, got the hand here, right? The simplest motion vector would just be up, down, left, right. Just those cardinal directions. I don't remember which preset it is where it'll change, but you will eventually see it change to being like up, down, but now this angle, that angle. So it's basically the direction, from the center out to the points of an hexagon. I think there is also one that is an octagon. So it's just, it gets, instead of only looking at, okay, moved this far up, and then, okay, but maybe it did move at an angle, but still it's like, it mostly moved up here, and then, some different stuff there. It's like, nope, we can actually say it moved over that way. But that kind of recognition, that this moved from here to here, that's not easy, okay? That is a complex function to do. So that's why the slower presets will have something that's more elaborate, because it is a more difficult thing to do. In theory, I could see that being something, because one of the uses for AI is machine vision. In theory, part of that is doing that, tracking something moving. I don't know if they necessarily want to bring AI into video encoding in that way. I guess in theory, I do like the idea, this is very much an aside, but I do like the idea of taking... Okay, back camp a little bit. 264, 265, AV1, 266, AV2, VC1, WMV, all these different video codecs, really all codecs, also audio codecs as well. What the actual specification is that is put out by the groups that have produced them is how to decode the stream of data. Okay, it's a decoder specification. You can encode the data however you want, so long as the decoder is able to decode it correctly. Doesn't matter how you get there. Like all roads lead to Rome, so it really doesn't. If your goal is Rome, the decoding specification, you can come from the north, from the south, east, west, however you want. Okay. I do think it would be interesting to see somebody work on an AI advanced, improved encoder for like even 264. Okay, where it's just using AI to develop like a better algorithm for figuring out where the placement is, the motion vector stuff or other things. But the output just be 264 compliant. So it would be a 264 stream. It'd be decoded properly. You could also do that with 265. I do think that could be very interesting. Because I could believe that you might be able to do that with 264 or 265 and get a very powerful result. Because 264, it can be encoded very, very quickly. Now, true, this would be slower, but it can also be decoded very easily. It is an incredibly fast thing because it's so old. Technology has advanced a lot, and I think it may have just been a relatively fast codec at the time. 265 is slower, AV1 is slower still, AV2 is going to be slower still. So it would be interesting to see that. Plus, it's also, everything can decode 264. 265 is actually a little iffy. I'm good. The Roku handles it fine, a Fire Stick handles it fine. 265, the licensing bodies behind it, they did some things wonky, basically, so it's hard to get a license to decode, but seems like my situation is good. That's probably the reason AV1 was created, was 265 screwed things up. But 264, very broadly supported, and I think it's also, I think the patents have expired now as well. But still, I do wonder, and that could be interesting, and like a slow -AI preset, that could be very interesting. Something that exploits the more advanced hardware capabilities today and software capabilities, because AI is software. But yeah, do something like that, and then just have the output be 264, 265 compliant. That could be very interesting. And I could see some people really diving into that, like researchers diving in, then finding some stuff where it's like, oh, yeah, we can do some fun stuff. Because it's encoded in here in 264. Okay, that's the video codec used for Blu-rays. 4K Blu-rays use 265. Regular Blu-ray also does support VC1, which is why I named that. It's an older codec, not as good at preserving details 264. I think I've also seen there is a Blu-ray. There aren't many of these that actually used MPEG-2, which is the DVD codec. Yeah, not very efficient, but it was extended because you can do this with the specifications. You can extend it up to DVD, the MPEG-2 DVD codec, extend that up to be 1080, to support 1080. 264 was actually extended up to not just 4K. You can do that to 8K. 265 was more so made for 1080 and all the way up to 4K. I think 8K even. I'm not sure what it is for AV1. But in any case, it could be very interesting. I could believe you could make a super 264 codec that could be really interesting for various Blu-rays. Like maybe you can get higher quality, but without as big a file size. So now you can fit more on there. Like one disc here has 4 episodes, a half-hour episodes. So that's 4 hours. So that's 2 hours per layer. That's actually reasonable. That makes sense. But what if you could push that a little further? That would be neat. But that's a complete aside. Has nothing to do with this. Sorry, this is what I do. Okay, so let's undo that. Now I've got here as well this x265 pass, which is to do 2-pass encoding. Really not worth it. So the idea there is you have the encoder run through, and it's not actually producing video. Instead, it's producing a log file saying, hey, when I looked at this before, I was thinking that this is what we should be doing. That's the first pass. On the second pass, it'll go through and takes that information, looks at it again, it's like, you know what? I'm going to modify that a little bit, and then we're going to do it. Okay, and then it makes the video. So that's more of just a, down here is, hey, there's an example of how to do two-pass encoding in here. I would not recommend using it. It's two-pass encoding when you're bitrate limited makes sense, because it is going to try to get the most out of your bits. But if it doubles the length of time to process, it's not worth it. It's not worth it. So is that. This is probably the main one that would be used, though, is to scale. Is scaling the video down, so it would be you want to set it to 480, okay? Because, and this is the case for plenty of Blu-rays, not these, where they may have extras on them that, hey, they're full HD, that's 1920 by 1080, isn't that cool? Well, watch them, okay? Seriously, watch them. You might be like, this looks like it was from the DVD, it just got upscaled. It might still be progressive, at least. But it still is this has all the quality hallmarks of DVD video. Or at least it is standard definition. They just upscaled it to 1080 because they could. It's like, yeah, scale that back down. I don't need it at that. Don't need to take in that extra space. So yeah, scale that. And that is achieved down here by literally just adding this to the filter chain. And then it passes all the same information to the x265 process, which is right here. So that first thing it takes is the input, which is only used down there. The rate, that's the second value, so that's the 3 megabit or whatever. It stores it to rate there, CRF, puts it there, and preset. And it is rate will always be set, because either the 3.5 megabit that's set at the very top of the file and then stored to the rate variable, or it's what the height of the, what is determined by the height of the video. As you can see here, though, if rate is not set, if the rate variable is not blank, it will never be blank, but if it is not blank, then rate equals max rate, dash max rate, whatever the rate variable is, and then buff size rate. That is how the max rate is actually applied. The maximum bit rate is actually applied. And it is both these things, max rate and buff size. So that is, trying to remember, it's the size of the buffer that the video can be decoded into before it is actually displayed. I think that's what buff size is. I don't quite remember, but these two together have to be set to that value if you want the maximum bitrate to be limited. Of course, that's being handled. I'm just trying to explain. Then CRF. If CRF were not set, it'll just use 18, which for x264, 18 was considered visually lossless, 1821. 265, it should actually be higher CRFs, because it is a more efficient codec, and the CRF scale is different, but 18 should be better than visually lossless. But it is also just, should be experimenting with it anyway. Then set the preset variable, and if that was blank, then use medium. I recommend slow, but medium, at this point, it's pretty uncommon that I'm using x265 for the main feature, but maybe for an extra. Extras can definitely be medium. Alright, then we get if the psychovisual rate distortion was blank, set it to 2.0. And yeah, in this case, I am actually putting in quotes. I'm not sure why. There might be a reason why. Like, I tried to do some other stuff, and just that isn't preserved, but this much is. And then we've got the x265 parameters. So FFmpeg doesn't expose every encoder parameter on its own level. So in order to pass it something, you need to tell it, hey, FFmpeg, I'm giving you a parameter for the x265 encoder itself. Not you. You're good, FFmpeg. You got plenty of parameters. I'm talking to the encoder itself. So, okay, so I'll pass this down. So psi-rd equals whatever the variable was. And then this is a convention that I'm using. have a config that will just store this information as well. So this then is written into a comment on the file. There's also, if we go back to this script, yeah, right in here, it's actually written into the file name. So when I am doing testing codes, every detail of the configuration, every parameter is actually being stored in the file name, which means then that they're always unique, or if I end up trying to repeat one, it's not going to bother reprocessing it because it's set to no. Don't do that. There's a cursor. There it is. Set to not do that. But in this case, because this is meant to be the script for the actual processing of it, no, just written into the comments. So that way I can, even in Windows, you can just right-click properties, and this metadata is visible there. It can also be visible in VLC and other things, because it's just part of the files metadata. So those are up here because I could probably do this a better way. I've gotten better at this with AV1. This 265 is the 265 scripts are borderline deprecated for me, so I'm not always backporting stuff. But anyway, so this is something that in the AV1 scripts use this format a lot. So if the AQ mode is not blank, then it will set the actual parameter given to FFmpeg here, so it just sets it there, and then changes the config. Same thing with the B frame, same thing with the tune. And then here we have the actual command, the actual FFmpeg command, hide banner. Don't need it to say what version of FFmpeg and other things. We do need to initiate the hardware device if we're doing the libplacebo, which I talked about in the video for filters. So this, and has to use Vulkan for that. The file input, then the video filters, which are passed to it by in the filt variable created earlier. Filt A, which is set here, and it's just, I have to tell it, hey, these are audio filters, -AF, because it's not always used. VF is always used. If nothing else, that set PTS equals PTS minus start PTS, that's always there. And then we have this, which is telling it, if there's a subtitle track, just copy it in. Okay? Well, technically it's not if, it is just stream copy it in. Alright, so the video codec, C, saying what the codec is for the video, libx265, pixel format, YUV 420p 10LE. I already explained this in the filter stuff. It's basically, it is 10-bit video. The source is likely 8-bit, but there's benefits to doing the math in 10-bit. Set the CRF to that, put the rate information in, which technically, if I wanted to, if I just deleted this, then it would be, there would be no bitrate limit. It would just be whatever the CRF wants it to be. Set the preset. Set the 265 parameters. Set the tune. Because that is handled a little differently. That is not one of the regular parameters. That is just a tune. That is its own thing to have. That's an FFmpeg level parameter, not a 265 level parameter. Then setting the metadata, and yeah, it just goes out there and finally writes that's the output for the file. Oh, yeah, sorry. I skipped over the audio portion here, which, I mean, true, audio is going to be handled somewhere else. But, yeah, set the audio channels to the number of channels in the audio. That's set up here. It's, for the most part, you're not going to ever have to change it. We're using Opus, so libopus. That's to set what the mapping family is. A lot of this you don't need to worry about. Rate aid, and, well, set the target bit rate with that was set earlier. We're not really focusing on audio in this video though, and just VBR is 1 saying, yeah, Opus, vary the bitrate as appropriate. But yeah, so it's like this is figuring out how many channels there are in the audio, and then this is going to make sure that the bitrate Opus is set to is right now, because these are both 0, will be just the default bitrate that the encoder would want to use, which, hey, that's fine, don't need to change that. But in theory, if I wanted to, I could say, hey, I want every coupled audio, every paired audio. So front and left speaker, I want that to get 120 kilobits every single channel. So that might be like front, center, or subwoofer. That can get 96. Default is 96 for a pair and 64 kilobits for mono. But yeah, don't need to mess with that. It should just work. I tend not to mess with it. So, all right, and also this would be the same in the other scripts, although with multi-channel, it gets more involved. But it still is. It's all the same process. It's just more involved because now there's multiple streams to have to deal with. Sorry, it wouldn't be multi-channel. It would be multi-stream. I know I shouldn't just be like that about when I'm making these mistakes. It's just it's not too big a deal. And it's not going to be the purpose of this video. Yeah, so it is really that this one is fairly simple. At 265 is fairly simple because I'm only messing with 3 parameters. Well, 3 parameters besides rate, CRF, and preset that isn't shown here at the moment. Yeah, there's not as much tuning involved, but it also it works. You don't have to get too complicated with it. And I will also say this. I should say this. In my experience, and this, I can be proven wrong, and it is worth checking. It is worth testing. A lot of times, for me, if I'm working with a DVD as a source, 265 is better to use than AV1. Not sure why. It is also true, I've not really experimented with that too much since the latest version of the AV1 encoder I use, which does seem to be better than previous versions. What I choose to explain it as is 265 and 264 are both from the MPEG group. Okay, that is the motion picture encoding group that also made MPEG-2, the DVD codec. So to my mind, and this could be very wrong, but to my mind, it's like, oh, they probably have some consistency across the codecs, even though, yeah, much more. 265 is way more advanced than MPEG-2. I might call 262 by accident. I'm pretty sure that's not its designation. But the people that made the x264 codec, well, encoder and x265 encoder, they also made an x262 encoder that will give you MPEG-2. But anyway, I think that there's some consistency there. So artifacting that exists in the MPEG-2, 265 knows how to handle that and will handle it better than AV1. Because I was seeing when I would work with some DVDs, if I tried it in AV1, yeah, there's something that's kind of artifacting from MPEG-2. It fell over itself. It had no idea how to handle that, and it just introduced more artifacting. 265, nah, I'm all good with that. But true, that is like from a year ago. AV1 has definitely improved since then. Maybe it would be better. I know I got one DVD over there. It was a very clean DVD, by the way. It's like it was a good looking DVD. That AV1 worked perfectly there, but as I said, that was very clean. So there wasn't much of that MPEG-2 artifacting there to be an issue. But I haven't really. It's not like I pulled out Deep Space Nine or Voyager down there, because those have only ever come into DVD. It's not like I pulled those out to see how 265 versus AV1 would compare with those today. But definitely when I was working with them, nope, 265. 265 all the way. That was most reliable there. I think that's it. AV1 is for another day. Multi-channel audio is for another day. No, sorry, multi-stream, multi-track audio is for another day. File muxing, the stream muxing will be another day. Subtitles will be another day. I'm just trying to remember, is there any other videos, just as I'm thinking through it, anything else to mention? I don't believe so. So those are still, for me, to come. I might have all these videos come out at the same time. I don't know. We'll see. But I did say it in another video. I will say it here as well. Maybe I shouldn't because I'm not sure if I will actually do it. I am at least considering going through and making, try to do a short version where it's just because it's like, maybe you don't care what the concept is behind AQ4 or B frames. And it's just say, hey, you want to start tuning in the video in with x265. Okay, you just come here. Change his way you set the bitrate, his way you set the CRF, his way you set. I might try doing those at some point. I'm not sure. I like the idea. I don't know. I'm running out of time to do them. Free time to do them. So anyway, that's me just continuing to blather. Just what I do. You'd really I'm at 45 minutes. How many hours long is this? I mean, in my defense, I've literally been building these scripts up for years. There's a lot that goes into them. And I will just show you. Those are all parameters for AV1. And then we get the tune. Then we get CRF. Then we get preset. And then we get bitrate. And then we get overshoot, which is another thing that's just something. AV1 is so much more complex than 265. So much more. But in a good way, because I'm going to enjoy making that video. Because, in this situation, use this. In this situation, use this. In this situation, like that. Here, not so much, but it still is hey, in the situation that it seems like, it's really grainy and it's not really being preserved well, crank up that psychovisual rate distortion. Go to 3, go to 4, see how that looks. 5 is its maximum. But try crank that up. That might get you the results you're looking for. So, without having to push the bitrate up necessarily. I mean, you may still want to push the bitrate up, but you might not fully need to do that. This might be a bad thing to do. It's I like that. I like talking about this stuff. I'm weird. I know. It's my hobby. Deal with it. And by deal with it would probably be don't watch the videos. Or don't watch them all the way through. I cannot blame you for that. Because I blather. I ramble. I rant. See you next time.